Good afternoon and evening, everyone, and welcome to our event. I'm Joseph Grove, Senior Communications Director for Animal Wellness Action and the Center for a Humane Economy, and the host of the Animal Wellness Podcast. Before we get started, though, I want to share something with you. That amazing footage was provided by Heather King, who also took the photograph you see behind me. She is one of our panelists, and I'll introduce her and the others in a moment. But first, a few quick notes. This event is brought to you by Animal Wellness Action and the Center for a Humane Economy, and it is part of our Claudia Miller Ignite series on animal welfare. Animal Wellness Action focuses on making gains for animals in Washington, state capitals, and city halls. The Center for a Humane Economy works for those same benefits, but in boardrooms, C-suites, and company headquarters, not only in the US, but in many places across the world. For those of you who are new to us, thanks for joining the team. Welcome aboard. We're grateful for you. We hope you'll find the content tonight and the updates we'll send you to be educational and inspiring, and that you'll take advantage of their ability to connect you to your legislators and other officials to make heard your voice for animals. Next, be aware that we've set aside some time at the end of this event for you to ask questions, and we hope you will, of both of our guests and Wayne Pacelli. You should see in your Zoom window a QA button or a question button. Please enter any questions or comments through that feature. I'll keep an eye on them, and at the end of the event, at about quarter until the end of the hour, we will ask those questions of our guests. Finally, tomorrow, everyone who registered will receive a link to the recording of this webinar, as well as any assets that may be mentioned throughout the event. We invite you to share that link with anyone who may have a similar heart for animals. Now, I'll introduce our speakers. Wayne Pacelli, based in Washington, D.C., is the founder and president of Animal Wellness Action and the Center for a Humane Economy. Recognized 7 times as one of the nation's top nonprofit executives, he's a 2-time New York Times best-selling author and has spearheaded over 1,500 state laws and 100 federal laws for animal protection. Heather King, based in Ottawa, Ontario, is a wildlife activist and volunteer rescuer known as the Owl Queen. For more than 15 years, she has documented and protected owls through photography, videography, and field research, inspiring compassion and action to safeguard their future. She joins this discussion to share her on-the-ground perspective on owl conservation and public engagement. Bill Lynn, PhD, based in Wilbraham, Massachusetts, is the founder and president of PanWorks, an ethics think tank focused on animal well-being. A research scientist at Clark University's Marsh Institute, he specializes in animal ethics, sustainability, and public policy. He took part in early discussions inside the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service regarding barred owls before becoming a very vocal critic of their plans. He joins this event to explore the moral and policy dimensions of protecting wildlife and ecosystems. That was a mouthful. Thanks for hanging on. I'm going to turn it over now to Wayne Pacelli.
Joseph, thanks so much. And let me welcome everyone. I think we've got a lot of new people who are participating today. You came in perhaps through the Owl Queen's social media platforms or some of our advertising about this event. We're so excited to have you. I've been working on animal welfare issues for my entire adult life. I had a deep, deep feeling that animals matter just as much as people do, in that they have the same spark of life that we have. They have the same will to live that we have. They want to avoid pain and suffering that's inflicted upon them just as much as we as individuals do. And that took me into this realm of being an animal protection advocate. And I have worked on so many issues, so many painful issues to confront many forms of abuse: factory farming, animal testing, trophy hunting, killing animals for their fur, staged animal fighting. And it is a broad range of issues that I've worked on. And all through these years, I've had such major touches with them. And I tell you, I really get excited to know that certain animals are out there and are not significantly molested by people. And I always had that view on owls. I thought they've had protection under the Migratory Bird Treaty Act since the early part of the 20th century. So the Migratory Bird Treaty Act has protected owls, hawks, eagles, and many other bird species, 1,000 of them, starting in 1918. It was upgraded through the years. And I really never thought I'd have to campaign to protect owls from people shooting them. And I got wind of this program from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service that it wanted to kill barred owls in order to protect spotted owls. And I began to research the issue and I looked it up and I saw first, I thought these are look-alike species. Ryan, I'd love to have you just throw up the first slide and have people take a look at these beautiful, majestic creatures. And Heather's footage that opened our show reminded us of the nurturing nature, the innocence and beauty of the newborns, these incredible arboreal creatures, and just a remarkable creative nature, a miracle of nature. Ryan, let's now display, since they have such similar looks, which one is which. The barred owl is on my left and your left as you look at that creature, protected since again the early part of the 20th century. And then the spotted owl, famous because of the so-called timber wars in Washington, Oregon, and California, where environmental groups sued, took direct action to try to address logging of old growth forests that are the favored habitats, these older trees with deep cavities that the spotted owls, the northern spotted owl, the California spotted owl, love to nest in and that are important for their survival. So Ryan, you can take that down for the moment, and just wanted to show people those images. And I began to look into the issue. I consulted experts. Dr. Bill Lynn is certainly one of those experts. I talked to Dr. Kent Livesey, who participated in a webinar on this issue some time ago. And again, the thesis of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service's environmental impact statement and record of decision to orchestrate a plan to shoot 450,000 plus, perhaps 470,000, perhaps 500,000 barred owls over a 30-year span in 17 national forests, in 14 units of the National Park Service, other public lands and private lands. I thought this is an extraordinary scale of exploitation. They must have some compelling reason for this. The reason that was offered. And again, I do want to say that a lot of people participated in this program. Bill is going to tell us a little bit about that later. But the timber industry really was pivotal in funding initial studies and kind of offering this thesis that barred owls are putting spotted owls in an awkward position, at a difficult position, because they're competing with them for nesting sites. The argument was not so much predation. It was really built around those nesting sites. And barred owls are certainly adaptable. And I don't dispute that the animals compete. But what I do dispute is the idea that human beings should intervene in such an extreme way with a normal and natural process of competition. Nature has predation, it has nest site competition, it has competition for food, it has disasters, it has hurricanes and tornadoes. Nature is a tough place for animals. It is a remarkable web of life. It's extraordinary. But for us to intervene in that process and to begin to pick winners and losers struck me as a really problematic approach. And I'm excited to talk with Bill about that. given his training and experience in ethics. But I began to look at that thesis and looked at the research, studied the draft environmental impact statement that was done, and then also began to consult experts. And it didn't take me long to get to a fundamental practical conclusion that the shooting of the barred owls as a way to minimize social competition between them and their lookalike cousins, the spotted owl, was not going to work. And we have amassed a long series of letters from scientists that essentially make the argument that you shoot barred owls in small portions of this vast 24 million acre, that's the so-called control area in Washington, Oregon, and California. And you shoot barred owls, from their homes, from the trees. They call them in with recorded sounds, shoot the mating pair. And then there are barred owls around them. And it won't take long for other barred owls who are territorial, just like the spotted owl are, to find the empty habitats in the sense of empty of other barred owls. Those are the first places they're going to go. So we have letter after letter documenting this behavioral response, this barred owl dispersal strategy that's part of their makeup. So we're going to have a lot of activity, we'll have a lot of shooting, we'll have a lot of dead owls, but they're going to offset that shooting through movement back to these areas that had been cleansed of owls, and it'll be a reset. So it's the equivalent of a treadmill. Lots of activity, lots of moving, lots of running, no forward progress. And I also thought, well, we have 1,300 listed species in the United States, listed under the Endangered Species Act as threatened, which is the less severe of the two designations, or endangered, which is the most severe of the two, the more severe of the two designations. And if we go down this road of managing social relationships between native, non-endangered species, non-threatened species, and then the native species and endangered or threatened status, where is this going to end? The Endangered Species Act was really designed to limit human behaviors that put species in peril, shooting them into oblivion, trapping, poisoning, destroying their homes. Now, there are cases where human beings bring animals from Asia or South America or Africa or Europe to the shores of the United States, whether it's the pet trade, like Burmese pythons that were brought by pet traders and then sold as pets, and people realize, oh, I've got a 15-foot animal who can wrap their body around my neck and kill me. They released them in the Everglades, a foolish, stupid, anti-ecological activity, and then those animals became established. There are control efforts that are being made. They're probably judged as futile by almost every serious-minded scientist, but that is an invasive species problem. Nutria brought from South America into the United States for fur farming. They escape, they establish immense populations, also ineradicable, but clearly an invasive species problem at some level. Wild pigs brought here from Europe for hunting preserves. They escape, they become established, they cause all sorts of issues, especially on ranches and digging up the ground if you've got grass and other human vegetative constructs, if you will. They pose a number of other problems. Those are very distinct issues from the barred owl. The barred owl has been here in North America. It's the only place that barred owls live. They have been on this continent for thousands of years. The fossil record shows well back into the Ice Age, 10,000 years ago and thousands of years before that. And they've ranged from Maine down to Florida, out to the Midwest, even to the Dakotas. And they have adapted, like so many other species have adapted to human perturbations of the environment. But they went there on their own. Range expansion, which they have engaged in to some modest degree, is something that so many species do. including human beings. We came over the Bering Land Bridge perhaps 18,000 years ago, and over the course of time, we populated the areas from Barrow, Alaska to Tierra del Fuego in South America. Animals live all over the planet because of range expansion. And if we begin to victimize animals because they don't stay in the boundaries that we set at one specific point in history and say that those animals are invasive, well, I think that's an anti-ecological notion. I think it's anti-biological, it's anti-evolutionary. Barred owls are North American natives. And for some environmental groups to call them invasive, for the Fish and Wildlife Service to call them invasive, I think is just a mischaracterization. It is a demonization. I think for them to call them bullies when all they're doing is trying to compete in nature, that is also just a demonizing of the animals. We see that with wolves. We see that with all sorts of animals that we want to victimize. You turn them into the other. You turn them into some creature that's not worthy of protection. And that's exactly what's happening with these barred owls. We are committed to trying to stop the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service from executing this large-scale killing of these animals. And the Congress has taken up this issue. Senator John Kennedy, joined by Senator Rand Paul, has initiated a Congressional Review Act resolution, SJ-Res 69, to put an end to this barred owl management strategy, to nullify it. And on the House side, Representatives Troy Nehls, a Republican of Texas, Josh Harder of California, Scott Perry of Pennsylvania, and Adam Gray of California have an identical measure in that chamber. The measures are attracting bipartisan support. They have 450 groups that Animal Wellness Action, the Center for Humane Economy, have organized, and many, many thousands of people have written to their lawmakers and urged them to protect the owls. And for so many months that we've been campaigning, to me, the arguments were, it's not going to work. It's a $1.35 billion cost. It is a plan that is obviously inhumane and unprecedented, and that these owls have never been subjected to any large-scale exploitation ever. But in recent days, there's a whole new set of arguments that have been advanced. Because just days ago, the Trump administration, which had some months ago had come out and nixed several barred owl killing grants, signaling support for the idea of not killing these animals and not using this money on a program that's not going to work. They've now done a 180. And they've done a 180 because timber companies and the Fish and Wildlife Service have, with the Bureau of Land Management, a Western land management agency in the U.S. Forest Service, they essentially have come up with elements of their plan that are now going to enable the large-scale exploitation of northern spotted owls. So a plan that was cast initially as barred owls versus spotted owls is now a plan to hurt both barred owls and spotted owls. And our efforts to stop the barred owl kill are entangled now with our efforts to stop the killing and harming of northern spotted owls. And I don't want to get too deep into the technical elements of this, but I do want to note that the Fish and Wildlife Service is creating a tool. It's a mitigation strategy to allow it to give incidental take permits of northern spotted owls using the barred owl killing as a mitigation measure. So under the Endangered Species Act, you're not allowed to harm, injure, wound, harass, kill a threatened or endangered species. But there's a provision in the law that allows some incidental take, say if you're cutting down a tree that is inhabited by a spotted owl, or a forest that's inhabited by a spotted owl. You might be able to do that if you've got a solid mitigation measure to offset it. The barred owl management strategy is being used as that mitigation tool. And what it's going to allow, now that the president and the Congress passed a provision to expand domestic logging and timber production in the United States by 2 billion board feet a year on top of what's now 3 billion board feet. That is going to require new forests for timber cutting. And where are those forests? Those are forests inhabited by spotted owls. And what we're going to see is large-scale issuance of incidental take permits with mitigation tools in the form of barred owl killing. So we're going to see a lot of killing of barred owls. They're going to, accumulate more and more dead animals. We'll have this massive body count from year to year to year, but there'll be incidental take that has not been used with any large scale familiarity by the Fish and Wildlife Service with this particular species. So before I turn it over to our guests, whom I'm so happy to have on this webinar, just want to say that this was a falsely framed debate by its proponents. It is not barred owls versus spotted owls. These are two North American native owls. We're blessed to have 19 North American owls. They do compete, they interact, that is nature. This is a plan to kill barred owls and use them as currency to enable the taking of spotted owls. And I really hope that we can get this message out to US lawmakers, to senators especially, because the vote on this issue on SJ Res 69 is going to happen next week. And unless we educate the lawmakers, they're not going to know. They're going to hear from the Trump administration that this is a good idea. They're going to hear from the timber companies that this is a good idea to kill these animals. And they're even going to hear from environmentalists who claim that they are for the spotted owl, but are actually working against us and therefore against the interests of spotted owls. It's all there to be seen. You can read my blog that I posted at animalwellnessaction.org or centerforhumaneconomy.org, the latest one that describes it, and you can write to us if you want more information. But we'll take this back a little bit, but I'm just really glad to have the handoff now to Heather King. Uh, a terrible experience like fighting for the barred owls and the spotted owls sometimes leads you to meet people and be amazed and dazzled by people. And I've been amazed and dazzled by Heather King. She's incredible. She's devoted her life to studying owls, to documenting them. Her photographs and videography are just extraordinary. And she speaks with such passion about these creatures. So Heather, thank you most of all for all your work. And we're so glad to have you here tonight to tell us a little bit about owls.
Thank you so much for having me, Wayne. I'm so happy our paths have crossed. I wanted to start by saying barred owls aren't just any owls. They're unlike all the owls. The very first time I seen a mother barred owl and her baby, I don't know if Ryan can bring up a clip or a photo of mom and the baby. I literally had my hands on my heart and I couldn't stop crying because the way the mother was preening her baby for 20 minutes straight, I was in absolute disbelief that an owl could display that form of love towards her child, and not just the first few days out of the nest, the first few weeks, the first few months. And the baby would consistently cry, and it wasn't for food. It was, Mom, I spent my whole life living in a tree. I'm really scared out here. It's a big, brave new world. Please, can you come and validate my anxieties and just make me feel like everything's okay? And this is what you'll see every barred owl mama do for months after they leave the nest. They were born to be mothers. They are family oriented. The moms and the dads both hunt and teach. And I mean, they are just the most magical owls in the whole wide world. And circling back to what you said, how the USFWS is labeling them as invasive, I think is a I agree. It's like a political tool. It's not scientific truth, and it dehumanizes a native species to justify mass slaughter. They're not talking about the fact that barred owls and the spotted owls, they look so similar, but they also make babies, creating the spotted owl. So while they're turning everybody against the barred owl as the scapegoat, the barred owl is actually the hero that's writing his own story because they're mating with the endangered ones, creating a hybrid. So the barred owl should be celebrated, not slaughtered. And every every barred owl has it hard enough as it is. People don't realize that 1 in 3 baby barred owls make it to adulthood. They're lucky if they make it to 1 year. And the photos and videos I shared with you, we lost that little angel this year. He only made it to 6 weeks. Even with the best mom, best dad, and all the food he could want, 3 mouths to feed, he didn't make it. And they already have everything stacked against them with the rodenticide, the luring them out with the calls. Even one bullet injuring one parent, that could kill the whole family. The babies will be orphaned. They'll have a terribly long, slow, painful death. And there's no creature in the world that deserves this.
Heather, you've been in the field. How do you get so close to them, and how do you capture these animals in these intimate ways? It's amazing. Do they know that you're a trustworthy soul?
Well, as silly as it may sound, yes, they do. And even when I can't find them, I'll walk through the forests and I will just openly talk to them and say, I hope you can feel me. I hope you can hear me. I'm trying to save your moms and your dads, your cousins, your grandparents and future children. And I'll touch the trees and like I just try to put as much energy out there. I have blinds and I have a camera that's a huge point and shoot zoom lens. So I'm very quiet. They don't really know I'm there, but I believe they can feel our energy.
Yeah. As I said, Heather, I've been at this a long time, and people used to make fun of me and other people who care about animals. And I think it really just reflected their own discomfort with the fact that they were doing something bad to animals and they wanted to try to denigrate me for doing that. And I'm just so proud of you for caring so much and for putting yourself out there and developing such a community of people who care about these animals. So it really means a lot that you do this work, and I want to just make sure you know how much we appreciate you.
Thank you.
Yeah. And Bill, I'm really glad to have you involved with all of your academic work in the space of animals and your understanding and this multidisciplinary approach. You know a lot about this issue, and you know I've been paying attention. I paid attention to the timber wars for decades.
Mhm.
I mean, it seemed to me the discussion was all about habitat for spotted owls and that it was human activities that resulted in cutting down of old growth forests and these big trees with these big cavities that were really
Mhm.
critical for these habitat specific animals. I mean,
Mhm.
am I correct? Is that where the debate was for decades?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. The 1990s forest wars and the 1990s forest plan management plan that was supposed to resolve that was supposed to protect large swaths of forest, including critical habitat for spotted owls, marbled murrelets, other animals in the Pacific Northwest forests. In the mid 2000s, we had the George Bush administration secede after the Clinton administration. And they were looking, just like the Trump administration now, looking for ways to expand forestry. And one of the ways to do that was to pick up on real research that suggests that barred owls and spotted owls were engaged in interspecies competition, often called interspecific competition. And there was a push to shift
the issue onto barred owls and pull away from questions of habitat protection, because the more habitat you protect and you don't open up for low-cost logging, the less profit is made for clear-cut logging companies, which at the time were sending those logs over to Japan to be pulped up and made into paper. That was what was happening with our old growth forests in the Pacific Northwest. So you had this real tension between these economic motivations, this ecological relationship between the barred and the spotted owls, um, and of course, questions of ethics. How do we do right by both the barred and spotted owls? And it hasn't turned out very well from there.
You know, as this debate has been going on, as these groups are focused on killing barred owls, I mean, the habitat discussion gets subordinated or forgotten.
Hmm.
And uh, have we ever had a case where a bird species has imperiled another bird species, like from the get-go, like been responsible? I mean, it seems like that's just not the way nature works, that these things happen over geologic time, and that any short-term burst of activity between species, even if it's competitive pressures, nature has mechanisms and they deal with that.
Well, I don't know of any case where a bird species had driven another bird species into
I haven't found
extinction.
one either.
Yeah, I just don't know of anyone like that. And while there are real issues between the competition of barred owls and spotted owls, the setting for that, the context for that, was the destruction of the old growth forest by ourselves. Now, there's also this question of landscape change in North America as Europeans moved across the continent and engaged in successive waves of forest clearing. It's unclear whether that delayed the migration of the barred owls from the east to the west, and they would have arrived sooner than the 1950s, which was when they started to appear in um, BC and then go down the
Hmm.
coastline down towards California, or whether we promoted that. Um, in the barred owl stakeholder group, though, that was formed to sort of think about these ethical issues, we made a distinction between responsibility and culpability. You know, whether human beings were culpable for the migration of barred owls over to the west, from east to west, we still had a responsibility to the endangered spotted owls, who, because of our deforestation, of their habitat and putting them into a position where their populations were so small, their critical habitat was so restricted that they were forced into this negative competition with barred owls.
But Bill, the human footprint is so big and it's so deep, we can make an argument that every species is affected because there are 8 billion of us on the planet, and then we obviously have such distinctive ways of living as compared to so many other species and all of this activity around us. I mean, to me, it feels like a very much of a stretch argument for people to claim, well, human beings, put those barred owls in the West when yeah, I mean, sure, through forest management practices, through Native American practices and trying to create grasslands, climate change. I mean, of course we had an impact. We have an impact on every species, but they got there on their own. And it was range expansion, which was really about adaptation and survival.
Yes, that's an argument that's made. To give the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service credit in this regard, though, having spent lots of time with them talking about this issue, also engaged in ethics training with members of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, many state agencies, these are people who really deeply care about the well-being of owls and the well-being of the species, because the owls are not just individuals out on the landscapes, they're also members of species who are part of social communities and ecological communities that are interacting in healthy or unhealthy ways. You're absolutely right. Most of that unhealthiness comes from us, our footprint on the landscape, disturbing those social and ecological relationships. But the idea that we had a responsibility from the perspective of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service was not really kind of a command and control for those people who were involved in the barred owl stakeholder group. It was much more, how do we do right by both the barred owls and the spotted owls? And here was the thing. We have, with the barred owls and deforestation and climate change and the catastrophic fires that climate change is creating, we have the slow die-off, the slow extinction of spotted owls in the wild. And once a species goes extinct in the wild, it's basically functionally extinct. You may have it in captive breeding programs. You may preserve it in a gene bank, but functionally it's extinct. And their mission and also their moral sensibility is to prevent that. So there was an attempt to think about how it is that we could preserve spotted owls in the wild. What came up then was the removal experiment, which was a limited number of barred owls that were killed to see whether spotted owls could establish their own refuge, their own domains in which they could thrive. What happened is that experiment failed. It slowed and in some areas paused the decline of northern spotted owls, but northern spotted owls were never able to establish a refugia in which they could control their own space, keep incurring barred owls out, and thrive on their own. And now that same experiment is being used as something of a justification for massacre of barred owls that will go on ad infinitum into the distant future in the vainglorious hope that something will change.
Well, thank you for that. That's such important background for us, that their studies really didn't show that the barred owl killing, even in the short run, had a big effect. And then
Yeah.
I just keep seeing statements from Eric Forsman, the dean of all the forest biologists, who was so involved in this debate, saying it's going to be a never-ending cycle. We'll never be able to stop it. The
Mhm.
barred owls are going to keep replacing those who have been
Mhm.
cleansed. It's not going to
Mhm.
work. So is this just the case that people just got focused on the solution and they just got intellectually invested in it? And then they can't break from it because, Bill, and before you answer it, let me just say, with the Trump administration's plan to dramatically increase timber production domestically, and with the Fish and Wildlife Service creating barred owl killing as a mitigation tool to
Mhm.
enable incidental take of spotted owls, this plan, ironically, is going to cause much more harm to the spotted owl than any benefit that it could possibly bring. And how can people who were focused on the idea of helping spotted owls now justify it in light of this practical use by the administration and by the timber companies?
So I'm going to take you one step back into the thinking of the barred owl stakeholder group, which will further underlie your point. When we thought about barred owls, spotted owls, we weren't thinking of the greater good for the ecosystem alone or the greater good for spotted owls, as if barred owl lives didn't matter. That entire barred owl stakeholder group recognized that each and every owl had intrinsic value. Sure, they may have differed in the emphasis they gave to ecological communities or individual lives, but that was part of the base understanding that virtually everyone in that barred owl stakeholder group had. So when we thought about the killing barred owls for the benefit of spotted owls, we were thinking in what bioethics is called is a harm benefit ratio. We know we're going to commit harm, but is there enough benefit, really significant benefit, to justify that harm? We made a decision, whether right or not, that attempting the experiment um, had a positive benefit to harm ratio. Nowadays, the experiment failed. And now, with the current management plan, you have those harm benefit ratios completely reversed. You have, uh, over the next 30 years, 500,000 barred owls are going to be killed for no benefit for spotted owls. And that harm is going to go on ad infinitum. And now you are sharing a new policy initiative, which has economic self interest written all over it to make a false claim that we can trade off the lives of spotted owls by removing their critical habitat and kill some barred owls somewhere else, which is going to magically open up space and spotted owls will inhabit that space. That's just not going to happen. That's fantasy land. And that puts further weight on the harm side without any benefits.
Well, I think you've really beautifully crystallized the issue and your discourse with folks. And I credit the Fish and Wildlife Service for bringing you in and others to have that discussion. And I just think that, and I'm seeing this, frankly, with some of the environmental organizations that are supporting the barred owl kill strategy and opposing our CRA.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we've laid it out. I mean, the barred owl killing is going to open up harm to spotted owls. It's tied in with the One Big Beautiful Bill. It's tied in with the fact that now we're creating a new mitigation tool which didn't exist that justifies the incidental take of spotted owls. We're going to cut down those trees that once they're gone, these are old growth trees. It takes 100 or 200 years for them to be replaced. We're not talking about just biomass, coming in. Shrubs and small trees don't matter from a forest owl perspective here. So I'm just thinking like people get into a rut, right? And I'm not saying I've never gotten into a rut either, but this whole plan suffers from a small number of people getting into an intellectual rut that barred owl killing is going to be some sort of salvation. And it's not practically because of the dispersal issues and the movement to fill the void. But now, when you think about this, the fact that the barred owl kill plan is also a prescription for harming spotted owls seems to be in a whole new space for me. And this is why I feel like we have a moment right now in the US Senate. We've got to convince 100 men and women who've been elected to serve in the United States to support Senator Kennedy's resolution, SJ 69. Please speak up. We have big forces aligned against us. I mean, the Trump Interior Department, very major timber companies, environmental organizations. But the power is still with the people in America. And we can flood those offices with calls. We can make logical arguments. We can win this fight, but we have to have you. And we have to ask you to please spread the word to others. Heather, you've been doing such a great job talking to people. How are people responding? I mean, do people understand what's going on to your videos on Facebook and Instagram? And I really urge everyone to follow you. They will be dazzled by your photography and videography.
Thank you. It's really interesting because a lot of people are saying it's all for the timber and the lumber, and they've been saying that literally for months. And then other people are saying, "What can I do? What can we do?" So I say, our SJ Res 69. But the thing is, there's also hundreds and thousands of people saying, "Save the owls, save the owls." Well, and I'm not trying to sound rude, but you, me, your neighbor, your dog, your cat, your entire lineage needs to call Congress, because just typing in save barred owls isn't going to save barred owls. So if 2 million people can leave a comment, I'm from another country. If I can type into Congress at US Congress and put my vote in, like we all can at 60 seconds, it's just 60 seconds. Please, for the love of God, people, please call Congress and save owls.
Yeah. Thank you, Heather. That's great. And, Bill, I mean, you deal with wildlife ethics issues and look at these questions. I mean, I feel like, am I wrong to think that if we go down this road, are we just going to try to absolve ourselves or forget the role that we play in species endangerment? And we're just going to blame other species because of natural, normal interactions?
Yes, I think that's a real problem.
I mean,
I think
the
that's a
fact is
real problem.
predation. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I like to say
Tell me
you can't
what,
kill your way back to biodiversity. And there's two reasons for that. One is it's ineffective. There's never been a killing program that has restored biodiversity in any place in the world. You can make minor changes, or you can exterminate certain species, like we did with wolves in the lower 48. But you're not restoring biodiversity in that way. But the other piece is the moral piece. These are living beings who are aware and self-aware and in relationships, what we call sentient, sapient, and social. They have an intrinsic value of their own. And we ought to be mindful of that and be thinking more about how we adapt our lives to coexist with wildlives instead of trying to control them for our convenience or our profit. And in underscoring your call for political engagement, I think it's great to make the reasoned scientific arguments about the ineffectivity of these killing programs. But we also need to start making the moral argument that these beings have intrinsic value in and of themselves, and we shouldn't be killing them simply because we feel the need to do something, because something hasn't worked in the past. And like you said, we're intellectually, professionally, agency, culture-wise, and economically pre-committed to a certain past course of action that isn't working out.
Yeah. 1,300 listed species in the US. They're all threatened by some other creature. I mean, great horned owls predate spotted owls and on barred owls. I mean, are they next? I mean,
Could be.
Wolves are threatened or endangered depending on different parts of the lower 48 states. They're threatened in Minnesota, they're endangered elsewhere. I mean, in the West, where there are mountain lions, they sometimes kill wolves. Are we then going to start to kill mountain lions because they kill wolves? I feel like this is a multi-trillion-dollar investment that the United States Fish and Wildlife Service could be going down here without the resources. I mean, they've got $120 million a year to recover 1,300 species. They don't even have recovery plans for most. And we're going to cannibalize those programs with this program that is doomed to fail, that has all this political opposition, doesn't have any sort of consensus in our society. It really upsets me, and it's the reason that I've been working so hard, and I'm grateful to you as two incredible voices on this issue to bring understanding and light. So Joseph, I'm sure that some of our attendees have some questions, so let me turn it back to you.
No, the question and answer section has been alive, not only with questions, but just a huge amount of praise, certainly for you, Heather, and for Bill on the work you're doing. One commenter referred to Heather as the Jane Goodall for owls, and that's high praise.
Here,
indeed.
here, here, here.
Yeah. So Heather, we'll start with you. One questioner asked about the brief lifespan of the young owls. Why is it that so many don't make it to a year old?
Also, only 1 in 3 don't. Only 1 in 3 make it because they become malnourished, or they become predated by great horned owls or raccoons. The malnutrition related development defects, when they're chronically underfed, it stunts their growth, impairs their flight and immune function, and equals death. And that's what happened with our local family here.
Okay. All right. Very good. Thank you for that. Wayne, we write about 450,000, quite a bit, as the target number to be killed. How did that number come to be? Is there any science behind almost 500,000?
Well, I think I'd maybe turn that over to Bill. I'd be happy to take it back, but he has been involved. I think in a broad sense, the agency under the National Environmental Policy Act needs to disclose the potential range of activity. And this is over 30 years, so it's 15 to 20,000 owls per year. I will say again, I said I was going to turn it over to Bill, but this mistaken identity issue is also significant. They completely downplay it in the environmental impact statement. You look at those owls; they look very similar, and I understand they'll be called at some level. So you're bringing in the birds who respond to that call, the "Who cooks for you" call. But Kent Livesey said the ones who don't respond are the ones who are going to survive. and they're not going to be called, and their offspring aren't going to be called. They're going to learn. So people are going to have to hunt them down, and they're going to have to, try to find them in these vast wilderness areas. And my God, they're nocturnal, so you're probably going to shooting at night. They look so similar. Their silhouettes are nearly identical. Their coloring is the same. One's a little more white than brown. The other's a little bit more brown than white. But Bill, what was the rationale as you understood it for the 450 number?
It has to do with the number of spotted owls that are out there, the habitat range that they're in, the number of barred owls that need to be killed every year, added up over time with fudge factors. I don't pretend to know the exact equation that the biologists and modelers used from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, but those are some of the factors there. But I want to underscore a point you're making about this misidentification question. When one of the big points that caused an eruption of concern in the barred owl stakeholder group was how was it that barred owls were going to be killed? So defining a protocol which we knew was going to kill barred owls and was going to sacrifice individuals to hopefully for the well-being of the spotted owl had to be defined. And Lowell Dillard of, I think it was Diamond Forestry at the time, was the person who came up with the protocol. He had been the original person who had been working on killing barred owls for the benefit of spotted owls. This was in Northern California. And it takes enormous skill. You have to be a skilled marks person. You need a squawk box. You usually need a retrieval dog. You have to call the spotted owl in. You have to track that spotted owl as it cycles in a spiral towards you, and in the air shoot it out of the air. You need a certain gauge of shotgun with a certain type of shot in order to do this at quote as humanely as possible. All right. That is far beyond the skill set or the knowledge set of your average weekend warrior. And the idea that they're going to take a 30-minute online class with federal agencies and then be qualified to go out and shoot barred owls without mistaking barred owls, great horned owls, spotted owls, and other creatures for one another is fantasy thinking.
And I tell you, Bill, in talking when I started this project and I was talking to people, they just said, "Oh, it'll never happen," as if they know what's going to happen. If you're looking for people, to do deer control or wild pig control, you've got a lot of Americans who pursue those
Mhm.
those pastimes and practice a lot of experience. Nobody wants to shoot owls. And the only people who are going to do it are people who are going to be paid. And as you're saying, it's a totally different experience and it's a
Mhm.
whole different level of the
Mhm.
ecosystem, right? You're talking a
Mhm.
canopy level here,
Mhm.
forest dwelling owls. So I think the dismissive approach really just set me off on that issue.
I
And
can understand why, and I'll add another piece of contextual information. One of the things that happened at the end of the barred owl stakeholder group is the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service committed to doing another barred owl stakeholder group to look at the ethics of the final management plan. I believe in my heart that if it was the same people at the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service as were there undertaking the BOSG, we would have done that for this management plan. But they weren't. They were under the Trump administration. They were under the previous Biden administration, both of which were willing to brush owls under the mat. So we didn't get that we didn't get that ethics review through the barred owl stakeholder group the second time round for the management plan. What's important there is for the removal experiment, we were explicitly clear that this should not be undertaken by a public hunt, that the public was not skilled enough to do so in any way that was targeted, that was effective, that was humane, that could be morally justified. Now, some people rightly are concerned that our decision to justify the initial removal experiment was wrong. I understand why they think that, and sometimes I wonder whether we made the wrong decision myself. But my point is, letting weekend warriors go out there and shoot away at owls is simply wrong, and we knew it was wrong. The experts in the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service knew it was wrong back when we were undertaking the barred owl stakeholder group.
Well, how are you going to create a labor pool to kill this many owls, right? With their low density, often living in wilderness areas that are roadless. The logistical elements of this are unworkable. And if you
Yeah.
really probe it, it looks unworkable. And again, I just think about the genesis of this with the timber industry. It's a deflection from habitat uh, protection issues, and to blame this owl, a look-alike owl. But Joseph, let me turn it back to you.
All right, sure thing. I want to tell everyone that tomorrow, when you receive your follow-up email, we'll have a link in it, and you can click on that link and very easily, it takes just a couple of minutes, have a message sent to your senators to support the barred owl. I'll include the number for the Capitol switchboard, and because of the urgency of this case, calling that switchboard and leaving a vocal message in addition to the email one you send would be especially helpful. This is the time for all stops to be pulled. Wayne, this is probably not a fair question to ask right at the end, but we've had some questions about how exactly it is the timber industry gains here. Can you kind of map that out verbally for folks so they understand the roles here?
Well, the timber industry is obviously a big stakeholder with these forests. These are forest owls, and we're talking about the Pacific Coast here, these extraordinary large trees that are coveted by the timber industry. We obviously, have a lot of uses for wood and paper in our society, home building and all sorts of things that are really, basic struts of our economy. So the timber industry certainly produces a product that every one of us uses. The question, here is where the intersection occurs with these endangered species or threatened species and the habitat and how we handle that responsibility. And now we have a push to dramatically expand the domestic production of timber. We're already, cutting trees in a lot of the designated areas that the spotted owls do not live in. So if we're going to expand this, and then we're going to create this tool to allow the taking of the spotted owls, which we haven't seen in decades, and the timber industry is at the heart of this, right? They're the ones who are on the ground cutting down the trees, the places that the animals live in. And I'm not, representing an anti, paper and anti-wood products position here. I've never really focused on that in my career. The reason that I'm interested in it in this case is that they are using the barred owls as currency to then take spotted owls so they can get access to those forests. That's my concern. And the timber industry, sees an opportunity for more profits here. And they're using the barred owls to get to the spotted owls and get to those trees. And barred owls are going to lose and spotted owls are going to lose. And again, I'm just amazed that my friends in the environmental community are taking the opposite position here. I just don't get it. And the only thing I can think of is that they are wedded to their intellectual position, just like the folks at the Fish and Wildlife Service got wedded to the idea we're going to kill barred owls and we're going to see how that works.
Right. Gotcha. Thanks, Wayne. Thanks for that. And I apologize to the many people who asked questions, made comments that we haven't had a chance to get to. In the follow-up email, I'll include a link to the Owl Queen's Facebook page, and I'm sure she would enjoy having you among her followers. I'll also include a link to the blog Wayne mentioned, where he outlines of this in much greater detail. I want to thank our guests, Bill Lynn and also Heather King. Thank you so much for being with us, Wayne. As always, thank you. And I want to say thank you especially to the people who took time out of their afternoon or evening to join us. AnimalWellnessAction.org, Center for a Humane Economy.org. You can find us on Facebook, X, Instagram, LinkedIn, anywhere you get your social media, you can find us, and we hope you follow us there too as we move these issues along for the betterment of animals across the world. Thank you, everyone. I've been your host, Joseph Grove. We appreciate your time tonight.